Good afternoon, my friends. It is September 21st, 2018, 1:10 p.m., one day away from the official beginning of fall, and we are starting to see a little bit of those temperature changes as we have a clear dip in the jet stream here, allowing that cold air to come down into the west to Midwest states, all the way up to about the Minnesota area, almost reaching the Great Lakes. Now, this will move itself west to east. There's going to be a few cool days in the Northeast finally. I'd say 4 or 5 days. We have a little bit of rain coming today. There is a little bit of a severe threat of storms in the Ohio River Valley, which we will get to. But you could see a constant 80 degrees in the mid and southern states, and then it cools off a little bit in the Northeast. But again, expect a about average of 60 to 65 degree temperature over the next 5 to 6 days in the Northeast. A little bit of a break. That is nice. We have a few things to talk about. One I want to get into really quick, and that is the fact that we are still dealing with the aftermath of Florence. As of right now, from the articles that I'm reading, the toll of death rises to 42. They are having issues with dams. Now, there are still parts of South Carolina that are not under mandatory evacuation, but they're urging residents to not return too soon. There's fear that ash and some sort of contamination has breached a dam and is now entering Cape Fear River, which is not a good thing. So right here it says a dam breach in North Carolina may have released coal ash into the Cape Fear River, officials say on Friday, which is today. Rising rivers force more evacuations in South Carolina, but other evacuees have returned home. So I guess that is not a mandatory evacuation anymore, even though they are urging some folks to stay away. It is their choice at this point. Again, Hurricane Florence has killed at least 42 people. I'm assuming that number is going to rise. Unfortunately, it just keeps rising every article I read. And basically, so on and so forth. The impacts from Hurricane Florence remain severe in the Carolinas on Friday as officials at an energy plant said a dam breach may have caused a hazardous spill into a nearby river. And they're talking about that Cape Fear River. So, still many issues with the water settling, overflowing rivers, and just still causing effects from that storm that hit days ago in Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, Wilmington, North Carolina may not be out of the woods yet, guys. We have a very interesting situation going on. Just giving you a little visual of where those severe threats are going to be for the day, reaching all the way from New York down through Pennsylvania. We got some West Virginia in there. Ohio, Michigan is also going to be involved in that, and so on and so forth. So that is severe weather for today. And again, that is part of this atmospheric river that we have seen before. And again, I'm going to tie this to something very interesting in a second. As you see this atmospheric river come this way, it's going to hook down and it's going to begin to affect the invests that we see in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, let's get to them. I want to show you something very interesting before we get on to our spaghetti plots and what we're going to be looking at. So again, here is disturbance 1, which has been risen to 60% chance over 5 days. That is not the 2-day one that shows a lower percentage. They're expecting this to form over a longer period of time, but there is some fair confidence in this storm. Another invest, number 2, 10% chance over 5 days. We have spaghetti plots for this one that I will show you. And then look at this. This is part of Florence, believe it or not. Florence left the East Coast, broke into 2 parts. One went up towards the north, towards Ireland. One broke off south. And then we have this that formed right in the middle of it, almost being the cause of the 2 splitting together. And this is what we need to look out for. I mentioned this yesterday, and we just have more data to support it. So let's look at these individually. But first, I want to show you an opacity picture I did just to show you how similar just 9 days ago, while we were expecting Florence, compared to today. Now, as I move back and forth, you could see at the date right here. This is the 21st. This is today. These are the invests that we are seeing right now today. But if I take this frame away here and we move into 9 days ago, you can kind of see we have almost a direct lineup of storms of where they were 9 days ago. We had Florence right here, and coincidentally, this invest today is part of Florence. We have an invest right where Isaac was at this time 9 days ago. Helena is close enough to this one to, I guess, relate to it. But then we have Tropical Depression or Tropical Storm Joyce. Obviously, if it was named, it reached Tropical Storm. I don't think Joyce is an issue anymore. I think this is a separate system, once again caused by the splitting of Florence as it exited the east coast of the U.S. So I thought this was pretty cool to look at. If you move it back and forth, you could see a lot of these storms are in the exact same place they were 9 days ago. And don't doubt for a second that that has to do with things going on in the U.S. Sorry about that. And that is this atmospheric river. And what it's doing is it's moving moisture, basically pulling it from the Baja region of the Pacific Ocean, also pulling up from the warm waters of the Gulf. And then you have this long stream of weather, like I said, with that severe weather right in the Ohio River Valley, reaching up through New York, even into New Hampshire and Vermont as well, just missing Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island and those areas, but those are not out of the loop yet. But the main point here is that with this wall of water we have here, if this begins to hook down, then we have some things to worry about, and we're going to go through that right now. Now, as you can see here, we have these invests. Here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, here's 4. Now, 4 being obviously the most intense that we can see here, number 1 being second most, so we need to watch these two very carefully as they could be named in the coming days. But what I find interesting is this one right here too, because this is actually part of Florence. Now, if you guys remember, if I could find Tropical Tidbits again, yesterday we were stressing the fact that Florence, when it left the coast of the U.S., it split into two pieces. We're using the European model right now. You could see there's one piece right there. There's another piece right there. This is Florence moving out into the Atlantic. And as you watch it, you could see the northern part of it moves out towards Ireland. The lower part comes right here, and that is our invest that we're looking at that could potentially hook right back into North Carolina. That is what is making me like, oh my God, is this really happening? And that's due to a few things. We have a very big low pressure system covering the northeast of the U.S., plus a high pressure bubble right here, which is forcing this invest to stay down and then eventually hook in this direction. Now, will it have enough time to form into a tropical storm? We don't know. More than likely, it will be named a totally different name, being that Florence came and went, broke apart, and now is in different pieces. This would be a different letter in the alphabet that we use for the Atlantic hurricane season names. But the fact that we see this high pressure here pushing this part away and then forcing this part down, this could very well be a system that moves right back into North Carolina. And that is exactly what the cone of uncertainty is showing. It's showing that it's going to come down and then loop right back up into that area. So we need to really keep an eye on this, because as this moves in, this one gets stronger. You can see this one moving across the Leeward Islands, and then you can clearly see this one moving across south as there's a high pressure bubble here as well. So again, just loaded with invests is the Atlantic Ocean. Now let's get to the spaghetti plots for each of these. We're going to go one by one. So here is disturbance 1, 60% chance over 5 days. Here are the spaghetti plots for that. They're expecting it to stay west and south. We got one little model here saying that it's going to hook a little bit north. Again, that is going to depend in the coming days on how those high pressures in the Atlantic morph and move, and see if it allows that storm to stay south as it approaches the Leeward Islands right here. If you remember, there's another invest right here that we're going to get to. So let's back up to this track. And then you can see number 2 is right here. So we'll click that. We'll check out the spaghetti plots for that one. So they're showing this right here to move above the Leeward Islands, over Puerto Rico, and then possibly over Dominican Republic, right into the Bahamas, possibly entering the Gulf, or possibly hooking out off the west coast of Florida and then back into the ocean. Still a long time to tell before we can see what this thing can produce. But the fact that they have the spaghetti plots means that they're watching it closely. Now let's go back again to the third one. So we have this one covered. We have this one covered. Here is number 3. Now check out these spaghetti plots. This is what they are expecting for this invest, which is part of Florence, but if it does become a cyclone again, will get a separate name. Now check out some of these spaghetti plots, guys. They are expecting this thing to hook south and then come back up north, and look at some of these areas that this thing's expected to hit. Same exact area as Florence hit originally. Some of these taking it into that same area of South Carolina that got hit after Florence made its initial approach in Wilmington. The Outer Banks are in that area. Some of these show the spaghetti plots pulling it up a little more north off the coast of Chesapeake Bay up towards the northeast area. So again, just another little scare. Just the fact that this is a part of Florence is just very crazy to me, because this storm will just not go away. So that is our third one. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then this fourth one here, surprisingly, doesn't have any spaghetti plots. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at it once again on Tropical Tidbits. We're going to go through the models. Let's start with the European. Why not? We'll start from top to bottom. Now, this is going to be pretty similar to yesterday. Not much has changed. We're going to go to the point where we see Florence exiting the northeast. This is the northern part of Florence. This is the southern part as it breaks apart. Our jet stream has torn it this way, and then this part kind of lingered on and stayed south. That is all due to different pressures, like we always talk about, guys. These high pressure systems are what split these storms. It's what controls their path. Everything, you name it, it's all about pressure. Storms do not move on their own. Unless they have no force, they naturally want to move north. So as we move forward here, you could see this first part of Florence moves up towards Ireland, like we said, and then there's their invest right there that I just showed you the spaghetti plots for right here, that they're saying is going to come back up and then possibly strengthen and move right back up towards North Carolina, possibly South Carolina, and even possibly up the northeast completely, according to some of these models. These will change throughout the days and the next coming hours, but nonetheless, guys, we have a lot to look at here. So let's get back to our European model. And as we move forward into the 22nd, 23rd, you begin to see that low pressure system forming basically between the two halves of Florence. Here's that first part. Here's that second part. Here's a very, very large low pressure system. And then you can see this high pressure here sticking in between these two lows, keeping this storm in the middle. So you can technically say that this storm was formed by the splitting of Florence. So this is Florence, and this has also been aided by Florence, and it could even be taking fuel from this system in the near future. But you could see that high pressure line sticks out here separating these two, which is, in my opinion, why this system right here is not being pulled out this way. It has nowhere to go. We have a high pressure here, high pressure here. It won't be allowed to go this way. It won't be allowed to go up. And the only place it really has to go is to kind of sit here, wobble around until other pressures form and control where it's going to go. But as you move forward into time, you could see that this storm gets stronger and stronger and basically becomes a hurricane in the center of the ocean, which is concerning. And again, you can see with your own eyes, they have recognized this as a 70% chance of cyclone over the next 5 days. So they are watching this closely. It's in red. When anything you see in red and orange, those are pretty serious. Those are more than likely going to form. Now, will they form into Category 1 hurricanes? We don't know. It's more of a, not a guarantee, but more of a good shot that we're going to see a tropical depression or a tropical storm, which in that case it would be named. So I hope everyone's following. Now let's get back to the charts here. So you can see how the European model has this thing forming a hurricane in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean by October 1st, which is about 9-10 days away, right after Halloween. Now we'll go to the GFS and see what they show. Something very similar, guys. None of these charts show anything different than Florence. This thing always does this. I don't know why. There we go. All right, so we'll backtrack again. We're going to do this. Very repetitive, I know, but you need to see how this is happening. Florence, Florence, two pieces of Florence. This is the GFS, separate model than the European. You see this part of Florence break off. You see this invest break off, which wants to hook up into the North Carolina region. Once again, that very big low pressure system and then the high pressure system separating these two, which is allowing this central hurricane to form, which is the 70% chance we saw on the cyclone chart. And this again is showing a hurricane forming. And then once we get to October 2nd and 3rd, it looks to take a dangerously close approach to the northeast. Now I'm talking even a couple hours a day, guys. These things can change. So tomorrow you may see this thing right in this area, and then the next day you may see it down here. But that's why we do this on a daily basis, so we could follow these patterns and try to figure out what is causing these hurricanes to move in different directions. So the GFS, as of right now, I believe has it coming closest to the U.S. after all these other low pressure systems form. You could see a high pressure system here forming, and it's kind of wrapping around the underneath part of this storm, not allowing it to move this way, but instead swoop down in this direction. And if anything gets down in this direction, you can almost guarantee it's going to follow that warm water loop as we are getting close to the equator. And the equator movement, as you can see, when we get storms off the west coast of Africa, they form around here and they stay low, just like our invest that we're looking at right here. These are being pinned down low because there's a high pressure right here. Had there been no high pressure here, you would see this storm's cone of uncertainty come up in this direction, and same with this one. So there is a high pressure here, and there's a high pressure here. So we need to wait and see if that high pressure is going to bow up this way, allowing this storm to come down this way, and even meet up with some of these at some point. And that's the same reason why you see this invest wanting to curl up this way. There's a high pressure here with a big low pressure moisture system above it, with the high pressure keeping them separate, which is why they're not combining with each other. So I hope you guys are following that. I know it's a lot to take in, but I want to go through all these charts to show you that they are all beginning to match and show something forming in the middle of the Atlantic, which could be a pretty significant storm. Some of these numbers get very low. I saw numbers as low as 942, which could put it in a category 3 to 4 range. Again, we are almost mirroring what we saw with Florence as far as the atmospheric river, and like I showed you with this opacity chart that I made, where these invests are compared to storms 9 days ago. So we're seeing a very similar pattern, obviously minus the Gulf storm and minus Helena being much north than this 60% invest here. So I thought this was just a way to show you that the atmospheric river can actually affect the Atlantic Ocean and cause similar situations as long as we have invest to look at. So back and forth, you can see those storms match up pretty close. Very, very interesting to look at. A little bit of extra data for you. So we've seen the European, we've seen the GFS. Let's check out the Canadian model. They are also agreeing that Florence has split in two, and you can see that here. First part, second part, as we move forward, breaks into two pieces. Here's our invest that wants to swoop up into North Carolina, and you're going to see this break off and form a whole new storm right in the middle, just as we have the high pressure and just as we have that low pressure storm system above it, keeping them separate. That is the key here, because if this high pressure was not here, this would more than likely be pulled up by this system and blown out towards this direction. But because this high pressure kind of cuts the gap in there, it's keeping this storm stationary right in the middle of the Atlantic as these other invests do their thing. So we'll move forward some more, and you can see that it wants to just stay there. It wants to become bigger. It actually pulls a little bit of a Fujiwara effect with some of the moisture coming over the northeast. And then we have a 989 pressure there. It's a pretty big storm. This was our 60% 60% invest. That was that long cone of uncertainty you saw before. So they are all beginning to match up and show, ooh, look at that. In fact, that invest gets pulled up by this storm here, which has the 70% chance of formation over 5 days. So that is the last frame of the Canadian models. In a couple hours, we'll have more to look at there. Now let's also check out, what have we done? We did the European, we did the GFS, the CMC. Let's check out the new FV3 GFS as well and just see what they have to say. Why not, you know? All right, so we'll backtrack it up. Same concept, guys. Repeat, repeat, repeat. But you know what? It needs to be done. Florence, Florence, breaking into two pieces, being pulled out by the U.S. jet stream, and then it breaks into two. There's one, there's two. Here's that low pressure system again. Here is the high pressure system again that is going to split the area, allowing Florence to break off and cause another storm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And you could see that right there. And that is a pretty big one right there. It hits 963, and then it wants to go south. That is the issue. And if you can look at this last frame here, this is what the issue is going to be. This high pressure system moves down into this area, which is, as of right now, keeping this from moving to the west. But as you watch the last couple frames, you see this high pressure dissipate, and as it dissipates, this storm makes a slight left movement, which means it could be heading in that direction. Now, we don't know. This is very far into the future. We're talking 10, 11 days, so there is room for change. I understand that. I know I get a lot of criticism for that, but you know what? I don't care, because when we're looking at these charts, it's important to look into the future and see what the possibilities could be. We've been dead on with some, and we've been wrong on others, and I'm the first to come out to admit when I'm wrong. But we can't be wrong when we're not making predictions. We're showing current data, and that's the whole point of this. We're showing how all these different pressures in the Atlantic Ocean morph and change, and that's what causes these storms to go in the direction that they go. So these last two frames are pretty key right here. You can see how the storm is in a northern direction, and then it begins to go south because there's a high pressure here, there's a high pressure forcing it this way, and then we have this high pressure as of now keeping it from going to the west. But as we get towards those last couple frames, you see that pressure move over top, and it's starting to break apart there. And once this pulls up, it's going to allow this storm to then hook in this direction. Again, 10, 12 days away, does not matter to me. This is a significant area to watch. And when you see things like this, 70% chance of formation, that's what you need to look out for. So we could have the potential of a cyclone formation again, part of Florence, going up towards the North Carolina area, South Carolina area, maybe even skimming the northeast coast, coming up towards Long Island and those states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. And then we also have to watch the 60% chance of formation of this storm here and the invest right by the Leeward Islands. All potentially have the ability to become cyclones. The water here is still very warm. You could tell that the water's warm enough in the middle of the Atlantic to where the pressures, even though it's keeping this system in the middle, it's still allowing it to survive and still keep its rotation. So we have a lot going on, guys. We have a lot to watch. This hurricane season is far from over, and you could see here they have named all of these except for that 70% one, which is kind of ironic to me. They have it labeled right here, but you could see the order that they were labeled in. So we have 97L here, we have 98L up here, which is the one that wants to go back up into the same area Florence just hit. Then we have Invest 99L, which is a high percentage chance of cyclone formation. And if you remember, we saw this coming across towards the Leeward Islands and then get sucked up by this possible storm right here. So, long story short, even though this is a long story, this is the area of watch right now. It is going to be the center of the Atlantic Ocean to see what this storm does. And clearly we need to watch this invest here, as if it has enough time to form, we could be dealing with another tropical storm hitting the same exact area that just got hit by Hurricane Florence, with breaching dams, polluted water, people displaced, you name it. A lot of things are going on in North and South Carolina and the Virginia area. The last thing they need is another tropical system to head their way. So I believe we have covered everything we need to cover for right now. Again, guys, it's almost like a mirror image. You got this atmospheric river that's going to curl over the Atlantic Ocean, and it's going to start pinning these invests inside this part of the Atlantic Ocean. And once they're here, if they dip south, that puts us at risk. That puts the Bahamas at risk. That puts the east coast of Florida at risk, and then we're talking about the whole east coast of the U.S. as a whole. And then you can't see at this point, but let's see if I can get down in this area a little bit. You can't really see it here either, but that invest that we're talking about, we need to watch the Leeward Islands, because if they survive and they make it underneath here, this is a whole different ballgame. The water down here is 87, 88 degrees, so the chance for the cyclone formation in these areas, which would affect the Gulf in time, really need to be watched. So, all right, guys, that was a lot of information, and I know it's hard to absorb. If you got to watch twice, 3 times, go right ahead. I'm going to link this article right here about how they are concerned about the dams and the road closures that are still going on in South Carolina, including evacuations that are still continuing due to dam breaches. Now, there's a second dam that is in trouble. I'm going to get into that later on today. If I don't, it will be tomorrow. But they are worried about the rivers being polluted, and we have looked at those river charts that are overflowing. So if these rivers are being polluted, that water is being overflown onto the land now. So we have a whole nother situation to worry about. So once again, I will link this article into the description box so you guys can look at this yourself. Again, here is the severe weather threat for today that we need to watch out for. And as far as the Atlantic hurricane season goes, we are going to be... The next username will be Kirk, and then we'll have Leslie, then we will have Michael, and then Nadine. And then if we make it past there, we will start talking about the last set of names. So we are beginning to go through the list here, storm after storm, a lot of invest going on in the Atlantic Ocean, and a lot of things to watch, guys. So, all right, that's it for now. I'm glad you are all staying with me. I appreciate all the support. As always, Caroline and I cannot be more grateful for every single one of you. And we're going to have a lot to talk about in the coming days, guys. I wish you good. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Stay dry, stay warm, stay cool, wherever you may be. And we will be back soon. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.